Bob's Burgers, the movie. Basically a murder mystery musical of sorts, which the latter is to be expected considering the use of funny songs in the Bob's Burgers show. Are you familiar with the Belchers? They consist of married couple Bob and Linda, their awkward boy-crazy teenage daughter Tina, precocious extroverted youngest daughter Louise, and pesky attention-starved middle child Jean, who all live in an apartment above their semi-successful burger restaurant near the boardwalk in a town that appears to be on the Jersey coast. So with that out of the way, let's get into this Culturgeist review of the Bob's Burgers movie. Just like in the show, Bob is once again having financial troubles while trying to keep the business afloat. The movie starts with the whole family singing about what they expect to be a great summer, with each one of them noting what their individual struggle will be throughout the film. Tina wanting to confess her love to the neighbor boy Jimmy Jr., Louise wanting to prove her confidence, and Gene wanting to book a gig for his band, the Itty Bitty Ditty Committee, while Bob stresses over the business and Linda tries to calm his nerves as usual. Then things quickly turn sour after Bob and Linda discover they have 1 week to make a payment on their business loan before having the equipment repossessed. Things are only made worse when a sinkhole explodes in front of their restaurant, preventing customers from being able to enter. And in an attempt to prove to her classmates that she's mature after being teased in school, Louise enters the sinkhole and finds the skeletal remains of a body which is linked to their landlord, Mr. Fischoeder. This leads the kids to try and prove Mr. Fischoeder's innocence so Bob can get a break on the rent and use the money to make his business loan payment. While the kids are busy on this adventure, Bob and Linda, with the help of Bob's #1 customer and pseudo-best friend Teddy, try everything they can to sell burgers despite their horribly bad luck. One thing I really like about this movie and the show or characters in general is that it's really a great display of the American dream. It's basically about a guy using his passion to provide for his family, with them helping him live his dream and overcome struggles along the way. It's enjoyable because it's so wholesome, which is something that's not common in comedies these days. Bob's Burgers, in my opinion, is a perfect example of what the typical American family should be. They might not be rich, and they might not have much, but they have their business and each other, and it's nice seeing how much they love, appreciate, and support one another, including Teddy, who's such a decent, caring friend in this movie, and does exactly what you would hope a good friend would do if you found yourself in the same situation as Bob and Linda. Other examples of the caring nature of these characters that I love include a scene where the kids all get into a huddle to make their plan during a serious point in the third act, and they pause for a second to enjoy the moment and comment on how they should do this more often.
This feels nice.
Yeah, we should do this more often.
Okay, yeah, but save the restaurant, remember?
Or when Bob gives his pep talks to the kids, using his words of encouragement to uplift them, or when Linda does the same for him. Those positive vibes just put you in a good mood while watching it. Although I could do with a little less Gene because I find the character kind of annoying, but he did have some funny lines in the movie. As far as the story, it had slightly higher stakes than what you would get from a typical episode of the show, which is to be expected considering this is a feature film, but they weren't that high, and I think they could have maybe done a little more work to make the story bigger than it was and worthy of the silver screen. That being said, there were some life or death moments, and considering this is a Bob's Burgers movie, where for the most part everything is about as chill as John Benjamin's monotone delivery, I guess the writers didn't want the stakes to be too high and stray away from the true nature of the show. But it did sort of feel like an extended episode rather than a movie. The pacing also could have been a bit better, which made some aspects of the movie feel a bit clunky or boring at times. The scene where the main antagonist gets revealed definitely could have used some work, as it completely lacks subtext and he just word vomits to music for 5 minutes straight explaining his plan. And I think the kids just assuming Mr. Fischoeder's innocence in the first act and going on this long adventure based solely on a hunch was a bit nonsensical. But the main problem I would say this movie had was that it didn't focus enough on Bob. Many episodes do center around the kids in the show, but this being the Bob's Burgers movie, it would have been nice for Bob himself to have overcome some sort of adversity, which for the most part didn't really happen. I mean, sure, he needed to raise the money to save his business, but the movie wasn't really even about that. That was more of a side plot, and nothing Bob did outside of saving his family in the car scene had any real effect on the outcome of the story. It is true that Bob claims he needs to be more optimistic like Linda, and the movie does give each character sort of their own individual story or struggle, as I previously mentioned, with Linda and Bob sharing their obstacle as a dual protagonist, but the only character who we really see experience any sort of growth in the film is Louise, and I suppose Tina to a small degree. But Louise is basically the main protagonist of the movie, and she's always been the most confident character in the series anyway, so portraying her as anything less than that just to have her prove what we already knew as fans kind of made no sense. But I guess this is somewhat explained in the initial song at the beginning and wasn't a huge negative or anything. It just would have been cool for the focus to have been more on Bob. I guess being a movie about a family who has long existed through the series, and it being a cartoon where things typically always fall back into place at the end of each episode, it's sort of hard to have any real character development without permanently changing them in the same world where the show exists. But I think they could have definitely had a character arc for Bob in this movie, where we see him experience some sort of significant change, which we didn't. And it's not as if we haven't seen this accomplished well in other cartoons adapted for the big screen, such as when Stan finds the clitoris, or Satan grows a backbone and stands up to Saddam at the end of South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Or even in the recent Beavis and Butthead movie, where the two numbskulls have their bro moment and declare they're gonna score together. So it can be done without permanently impacting the nature of the show. But unfortunately, this didn't happen with Bob in this movie, outside of a little bravery he shows at the end. But on a positive note, there are small glimpses of some of the beloved side characters from the show, which is cool, and there are references in this movie you will probably understand best if you're already a fan, like Tina's obsession with horses and zombies, or her crush on Jimmy Jr., Louise's tendency to imagine her toys as living creatures, or Gene's band, the Itty Bitty Ditty Committee, which are all references from episodes in the series, and I think they did a good job of incorporating these elements into the story in a way where fans will notice and appreciate them without leaving new viewers confused. As far as how funny this film is, it's pretty much what you'd expect from Bob's Burgers. Typical juvenile poop, fart, and butt jokes, and that same style of dry deadpan humor you know from the show, which some people might not get if you're not already a fan, since it takes a certain type of person to find this kind of comedy funny. But if you are a fan of the show, you most likely will enjoy the movie just as much. I'm personally not a Bob Burgers mega fan, but more of a casual viewer. It's a show I'll put on sometimes when I'm working just to have something entertaining to listen to, and it typically gets one or two legit laughs out of me with a lot of little chuckles. This movie was pretty much on par with the show in that regard. I genuinely laughed 8 times and chuckled 15 times, which isn't much considering this is a comedy with a theatrical release, especially considering Beavis and Butthead was straight to platform, and as I mentioned in my review of that movie, it got 47 big laughs out of me. But this just isn't that same kind of comedy, and dumb humor is more my style. So the fact that I didn't laugh much here doesn't necessarily mean the movie isn't funny or that people who appreciate this type of humor wouldn't find it much funnier than myself. It did provide pretty much what I expected in terms of jokes, so it was definitely enjoyable, but there weren't many quotable lines or funny standout scenes like you would typically have in a great comedy or cartoon movie. It is funny in its own clever way that doesn't require it to be vulgar or too over the top, which is refreshing considering that's what many comedies have become anymore. Repeated attempts to outshock, offend, or gross out the audience, constantly ramping up the outrageousness with each new project. And this movie's mild nature makes it a film that the whole family, including kids of any age, can enjoy, which is cool. The animation in this movie was definitely better than in the show. There seemed to be a wider variety of colors and more detail in the illustrations, giving things a richer and more vibrant look. Most of this movie was very visually appealing. At times you could tell it was enhanced with 3D software, but was still made to look 2D, similar to how they do many scenes in Futurama or the newer seasons of Family Guy when they need to get a shot that changes the perspective mid-scene. But the technique seemed to have been used sparingly and gave these moments a polished cinematic look without being distracting. You could also tell they tried to make the animation appear a bit more dramatic with the way they lit the characters and added shadows to the scenes, similar to the changes made for the Simpsons movie. And it was done well here for the most part, although some viewers might find the dramatic lighting and shadows to have been slightly overused and a bit overwhelming. Another thing worth noting about this movie is that it's meant to be somewhat of a musical, and it starts off well in that regard, but something I found odd about it was that it really didn't have as much music as I expected. Now personally, I'm not a real big fan of musicals, unless they're very well done, and by that I mean the songs are memorable, enjoyable, and in the case of cartoons or sitcoms, funny. Again, the South Park movie did this excellently, with songs that not only drove the story forward, but were catchy and funny. Same for a lot of the songs from The Simpsons TV show in the early years, and many episodes of Family Guy, as well as Bob's Burgers in TV form. But here it seemed that was only really the case with the very first song. All of them did drive the story forward in a way, but were sort of forgettable, and if they weren't going to pack the film with funny, memorable songs, then they probably should have just left them out altogether. It seemed like they only really had 3 main musical numbers, but the score in general, outside of the songs, was great and definitely created a perfect vibe for the film. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of musicals, so I was actually happy it didn't waste my time with a bunch of unnecessary song and dance scenes like I thought it might. But I can see how some fans might be disappointed if they expected there to be more. So overall, I think this is a fun, entertaining family film that's worth a watch, but for me personally, it doesn't have much replay value as it's not funny or exciting enough to make you want to watch it again and again. Although I did watch it twice for this review and chuckled more the second time at things I didn't pick up on the first. And some viewers claimed on Reddit and Rotten Tomatoes to not only have watched it twice, but they went back to theaters to see it a second time. So if you're a big Bob's Burgers fan, then maybe you disagree with me here. I also read some comments of people who didn't see it in theaters, but loved it so much that they wish they would have. The critics also loved this movie, with most of the reviews I read being positive, earning it a critic score of 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, with an audience score of 89, and that's pretty much exactly what the show is rated on the site. IMDb came in a bit lower at 7.2, with an 8.2 for the series there. But it unfortunately only earned $34 million at the box office with an estimated $38 million budget, so it seems to have lost money. And as usual, my answers to the following questions are these. Was the story good? Well, it was pretty good and fairly entertaining, but I think it could have been a little better. Was the animation good? The animation was excellent and was one of the best parts of watching this movie. Was it well executed? Like I said before, I think the pacing could have used a little work, as could many aspects of the third act, including the script and the reason why the kids go on this journey to begin with. And finally, was it funny? Not hysterical, but was as funny as you'd expect a Bob's Burgers project to be. So overall, I'd give this movie a C+. What did you think of it? Are you a fan of the Bob's Burgers series? Let us know in the comments, and thanks to anyone who subscribed or clicked like on this video. Feel free to check out the rest of the channel for more Culturgeist content. I'll see you there, and until then, live well and take it easy. Later.